Welcome to this week's review of Top Gear Series 26 Episode 2. This week's review will contain spoilers for the following episode. If you have not watched the second episode of the new series of Top Gear, please do so now by heading to the BBC iPlayer or BBC Two and watch the episode and come back here and watch the review. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hello and welcome to this week's review of Top Gear Series 26 Episode 2. This week, the Top Gear team go to Sri Lanka to test out whether tuk-tuks are the best mode of transport for getting across the city by putting it through its paces with different amounts of challenges and breakages. Is it still as robust as people say it is? This is one of the more interesting elements to this week's episode. And it's one thing that I liked about it. However, later on in this review I will get to the bits that I liked but I didn't like in terms of the editing style that was used. I found the Sri Lanka film to be very entertaining, very funny at points, and it is definitely up there with, I'm not going to say the Suzuki Ignis film because that we saw last week, because realistically that was just political jokes thrown at something that is supposed to be factual car entertainment. And I do politics, but when Brexit jokes are being overused, especially over the last couple of months between Doctor Who and now Top Gear and comedy shows like that, I'm not a fan of politics being used in shows that are supposed to be factual as a way of getting your point across. And it was evident last week in the episode about what was so political about it, albeit it was a dig at their own problems. I still don't like using political terms. I still don't like the use of political terms in the sense of motoring issues and whatnot. It's just political terms and motoring issues do not come together as one, so I'll just glance over that. Moving on to this week's studio guest. He is the star of Westworld and many other TV shows. Currently starring in Netflix's Westworld. He was an alright guest. There are some ups to this interview. Again, with this series they are going back to the fact that each new celebrity guest has to be trained before actually going out and doing their lap on the Top Gear track. This was one of the things that kind of didn't annoy me about this episode, but annoyed me about the last few series of the rebirth of Top Gear post Clarkson, Hammond and May, is that with the reasonably priced fast car segment, okay, I get your car is a super fast Toyota GT86 and that it has oversteer and controllable issues, but really does all the celebrity guests have to be trained in how to drive the car? I don't think so. And this is an element that doesn't have to go completely, but please don't have Chris Harris coaching the celebrity guests on how to drive a car for Series 27, as this does not work in my eyes and has not worked for the last two series. But other than that, the interview was superb. Sri Lanka film was superb, and the bit that annoyed me about this episode was the first film with the BMW M5 and the Mark 63 AMG was how the film was superb, but just how they edited it. In terms of editing aspects, what they did was they over-saturated the sky so it was more blue than it actually is. They made the clouds darker, the track darker, and the car darker than it already is, and used almost a dehaze effect, like shown last week on my other channel. I explained briefly what that does and how it affects the overall image of the thing. In terms of editing aspects though, for a car show, it was too overly edited, and it could be done with a little bit more less editing and more actually focusing on the car content of a factual car show. The film was superb, just the editing let it down slightly, and for that reason I'm giving this episode a 7.5 out of 10. Simply because I think the editing could be doing much better, although the Sri Lanka film was very funny, and there was references to the hover van back in Series 21, made with the floating tuk-tuks on the water going over to India, which is nice, although I do hope that this does not become a repeating pattern for the next 4 weeks. Yeah, so this week's episode gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10 for the simple reason that the editing in the first film that Chris Harris did, although he's a good journalist, let it down slightly. I'll see you next week for my review of Top Gear Series 26 Episode 3. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on Sunday. Bye for now.